Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we are all in the midst of this epidemic. I think sometime back in January, February, when we started it, it was not in a very big way. It had not come in a very big way. So slowly, what happened is slowly we the government imposed a lockdown, and because of lockdown, so we all stayed in our houses. So there was a very small spread. But during this time, we were witnessing through the media and other places that how it was going on in countries like Europe, like Spain and other places. So it was really a great bad show to see it in those countries, that many people dying and what we observed. So we thought that no, the Indian immunity is very strong. We are not going to face much of this crisis. But soon the curtain was lifted, and now we are in the midst of the one of the worst forms of pandemic. Many of you who are staying in isolation may not be able to realize or to relate. You may see only the figures, but what we are seeing it in the hospitals. My wife is also a frontline COVID warrior. She is also a critical care consultant in another premier hospital in Hyderabad. So you won't believe that there are no beds in any of the hospital. For each vacant bed which we are creating, we are getting almost a queue of 7 to 8 people who are waiting for that bed to become vacant. So if they get a chance, they get inside and they have a chance to fight. It is not that a guaranteed bed ascertains your right to live, because even after admissions we are having mortality, so fatalities are going up in these cases. And the worst part of it is this pandemic, it's complete like a new to us. Even after so many months, I would say 3 to 4 months of experience that we had, so we are not able to understand the deeper intricacies as we have been able to understand about many of the other diseases, of course, be it cancer, be it other infections. We are not able to understand the intricacies, and it is very, very unpredictable where which patient is going to do worse or is going to land up in trouble. So that is, it is becoming a very, very difficult situation for us. We cannot counsel the patient's attender that no, you are definitely going to come out, your relative is going to come out. We can't say that because it is not the age factor. So today, what I want to just tell it to you, I don't want to make it a very big and dramatic thing. So there is so much of what I would say misinformation which is going on in the media, in the public, and in something like this and that is going on. So I would like to dispel a few of them. There are many things which are beyond my domain of expertise. I would not like to comment on those things. So I would definitely refrain from commenting on things which about which I do not know. And many things which I would like you to introspect and think that this may not be a truth. So we are all being fooled into many traps, so, which is happening in this era. Just like the financial traps which are happening, the false calls which you are getting. So similarly, in the COVID era also, there are so many traps which are being created by many people. So let us start today. So can I have the first slide, please?
Yeah.
So friends, so we are going to changing concepts. Why I named it changing concepts? Over the years, like even last time when we presented, we tried to present about the how to take care of the various group of people during this era of COVID. But as we are coming out, so things are becoming very different. So now, from the actually, I wanted to make most of you abreast about what actually the problem is and what are the newer things which we can do, about which we should ponder. So that's why I tried to name it changing concept, emerging therapies. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this was a small heading which appeared in the Indian Express, and it said that most of COVID-19 victims in India belong to the most productive age. So when the initially the victims started, when the COVID-19 started in the European countries, mostly in Italy and Spain, so we found that the large number of dying there, and we found the movies about or the pictures of the large number of coffins which are going out. But most of them were elderly people. So they were very, very senior citizens. They were above the age of 65, 70, or maybe more, and they had a huge amount of comorbidities. So we all thought that maybe that is it is a disease of the old people, those who are the those whose immunity is concerned, and we tried to propagate special precautions for elderly people. So this was what the common myth was that. But in these another coming 3 to 4 years which we have spent with COVID, we found that it is not the case in the Indian scenario. So as the Indian Express shows, and there was a study. Next slide, please. it has been seen that in the Indian context, what we found that it was conducted by Indian Institute of Population Studies in Mumbai. They found that more than 50% of the COVID deaths in India have occurred in the age group of 40 to 64 or the 35 to 64. So you can say that this is the most productive area, the time when the people are likely to contribute most economically, both to the nation as well as to themselves. So losing this population is a great loss to any nation, the working nation. Well, there are some critics of it. They say that in India we have a larger population base, which is in the middle age group, and very less population which is there in the senior citizens group. But definitely, this is not wholly correct, because we do find that this percentage of young people dying in our ICUs is much higher as it was seen in the European ICUs. This is definitely a cause of worry and a cause of threat, that many of the youngsters today, I feel that they are thinking that we being young people are not liable to be affected by the disease. It is more for the elderly people with comorbidities, with cancer, with diabetes and hypertension, sugar. So it is not like that. Even young people without comorbidities, without any other issues, are dying in my ICU. So it is not just limited to this. Is something myth I wanted to bust it. Next slide, please. Yeah. So there is a lot of communication errors now related to the modes of transmission. So definitely now we all knew that transmission is definitely is happening, and this is a very the specificity about this COVID is that it is a highly contagious disease. Contagious means that it transmits itself very easily. And the worst part of it is, like in the other viruses like measles, mumps, rubella, and others, we had seen that there is a shorter transmission time, but it is not so in the case of COVID. In the case of COVID, the transmission time is quite huge, and I will discuss about it in detail in the coming slides. So, what are the common modes of transmission that you usually see? So, first is that the contact and droplet transmission. So in this, the contact and droplet transmission, this is one which occurs through direct or indirect or close contact with the infected people. It is directly through the inhaled, through the infected secretions like saliva or the respiratory droplets when the person coughs, sneezes, or talks or sings in public, very close contact. That is why we try to avoid the around 6 feet distance that we are saying, because it is usually presumed that a distance of 6 feet is necessary for the to maintain an amount of distance so that these respiratory droplets they cannot fall on. So this is the first one. The second one is the airborne transmission, which has caused a huge amount of uproar. Even in the, I got a large number of messages in my mail, and other people started calling me. The airborne transmission was misunderstood as people that it is that the COVID is being transferred. If you literally transfer it, it means that it is coming through air. So it does not mean that if you have a COVID who is your neighbor in the neighboring house, let us say in your neighboring flat or next house, and there is a breeze of air, that breeze of air is going to bring in the COVID from your neighbor's house to you. So it is not like that. It is again that when a person coughs in a particular place, let us say he coughs in the middle, in the lower part of in the common lift of your house, in which the common flat in which you are going down. So in that lift, the airborne transmission, those agent infected agents or the droplet nuclei, which are called as aerosols, they remain infectious, and when suspended in air over long time or distances, they can reinfect the other person. But here I would like to tell you one particular thing, that the amount of viral load that is necessary to cause an infection is quite high. And if a person leaves a few amount of, let us say, his aerosols in a lift or something, and you inhale them, the viral load, if that person is in a very infective stage and he has let out a huge amount of virus, then the chances of you getting the disease from that airborne transmission is high. But if he has left a few and most of them have died and he is not in the very high transmission phase, then your chances of getting it with a few couple of viruses or 100,000 viruses, it is not possible. Third thing is the fomite. Fomite is something which now many people are using. Now we are respiratory secretions or droplets which are expelled by the individuals. They can settle on the table. They can be on the air. They can be on the handles, tables, commonly the toilet seats and other things. So they can be sources from which you can get the infection from others. Now in this, I have got the next slide. This WHO has given this particular, so what are the common places through which you can usually get it? So tissues are the most common. If we use a tissue for coughing or sneezing or cleaning our respiratory secretions, they should not, they should be disposed of in a very, very nice manner. Doorknobs, as you all know, they are very common. Digital devices, sharing of digital devices, phones and laptops, mouse, and these lift buttons. These are, and the pens also, these are common pens. These are very common sources of infection. These are called fomites. Fomites means an instrument which transmit infections from one to another as a carrier. So these fomites are something which we are supposed to clean them after every use, and or try to minimize their, and they should not be used by any other people. We should try avoiding using by other people. Next slide, please. So what are the three things where you are likely to get it? This is something which is known to everybody, but still I want to reinforce that. So it is the three C's, what we say. The crowded places. The crowded places means like the markets, the bus stands, the common public transport media. Then the close contact setting, especially when you are sitting in a restaurant where there are, you may be going with your wife or family, but definitely the next person who is there, he is not 6 feet away from you. He is very near to you, and there is a close contact settings. And third is where confined spaces, like you go to cinema halls or certain things where there is not much of air change, or you go to closed auditoriums, packed auditoriums, lifts, and other places. There you are. It is definitely risky for you to travel to these. So it is said that you should avoid all these three places: crowded places, close contact settings, and confined and enclosed places. Next slide, please. So another point is, now many people have asked in this previous the questionnaires that they have sent that I have a COVID now, so what precautions should we take? So you can understand, or you can answer all these questions, provided you understand that when is the viral shedding highest. So the SARS-CoV-2 RNA can be detected in people. That means that you are likely to transmit the infection 1 to 3 days before their symptom onset. But remember the thing: the highest viral loads are observed during the day of symptom onset, followed by a gradual decline over time. Which means that the day you get the sore throat, the day you get the viral fever. So we will come to those quarantine and other measures which we are going to discuss. This is the time when you are highest, your possibility of shedding the virus is the most, because the virus is in the rapid multiplication phase. Secondly, the duration of the RT-PCR positivity, or what you mean to say the infectivity, appears to be 1 to 2 weeks for asymptomatic patients. That means you may have no symptoms, but yet you can transmit it for almost 14 days. For 3 weeks, it can be into mild to moderate diseases. Mild to moderate, I will discuss with you next slide. So in the patients with severe COVID-19 disease, it can really be very, very longer, which means that it can be months also, and it can be weeks. The patient can transmit in his feces or in his urine for quite some time. We have seen patients who have transmitted for more than 21 days, 32, more than 30 days. So this has also been reported. Next slide, please. Yes, so this is something which is very important for you all to see, and you can form a picture of it in your mind. So why we are devising the disease into the moderate or into the severity of the disease, we are into classifying into category 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you all have to be very cautious about the category 1 and category 2. So the category 1 is the asymptomatic, or that is a patient who does not have any symptoms, or who has mild flu-like symptoms. That just when we have a flu, that you are having a body ache. Many people have asked me the question that I just had a bit of headache. Shall I go for the test? Yes, you should, because flu-like symptoms, if there is fever, high fever, you may not have breathlessness. Other symptoms which you are having with the flu, it may be sore throat, and there may be something you may have like body aches and malaise. Malaise means you don't like to go out anywhere. You just feel something just like the viral fever illness type. This is called a mild disease. And in this, there is a role for the pulse oximetry. Now, there are so many people have purchased the pulse oximeter. If you have a pulse oximeter, or you can arrange one. So it is usually your saturation on room air, it is 97%. This is the normal. Most of the people, 99% of the population has on room air 97 and above. It can be 97, 98, 99 or even 100. So if you have these symptoms with 97%, you are in the mild form of the disease. So next category comes to the moderate. So in this kind of moderate is the people, those who are in the common other people, what you will find once you are not admitted to the hospital or when you are not, you are in your house. When do you know that my disease is progressing from mild to moderate is when you feel that you are becoming very difficult in breathing. And if you have a pulse oximeter, if you find that your saturations on room air is coming to 90 to 94. So this is the time when you need to seek medical care. Another symptom which you can detect at house or in your relatives or friends is the increase in respiratory rate. If you measure the number of breaths that you are taking in a minute, it is normally for you and me, everybody, it is usually 12 to 14, or maximum it can be 15. So what is the, you can do it if you feel that if it is going to more than 15 to 30 per minute. So it is definitely, it is a dangerous thing and you have to definitely seek a medical advice. Now, why I want you all to, the severe and the very severe are definitely, these are for the medical purposes. This is our hospital admission criteria where we do shift the patients. It is based for that. But I wanted the people to be realizing when from mild you are going into moderate, that is the most dangerous phase. Why? Because many people have asked that I have just mild symptoms of flu. What should I do? So at that particular point, you should be, a home quarantine is definitely enough for you. Why? Because in the home quarantine, you can understand that you don't need to come out. But there is one thing which you have to realize during this phase is that during this phase of home quarantine, your maximum chances of transmitting to others is there because your viral load or viral shedding is very, very high in this particular period. And the problem is what we are facing now, people are coming to us either in the moderate or in the late moderate or very severe form. So these kind of people, they are not responding to therapy. One of our doctor colleagues had asked me today in the questionnaire that why are you finding the difference in therapy? So this is one of the common things what we are observing, that the quicker we are treating the patient, the better responses we are getting in most of them. So those patients who have already wasted 7 to 8 days in the mild and they are already progressed deep into the moderate form, or hey, they have landed in the severe that in the ER we had to put them on a BiPAP for maintaining a saturation of 100% or 90% and above. So those kind of patients do very bad and they are really the cause of worry in today's epidemic. And they are the most common patients who have mortality very high. Next slide, please. This is what I was just now telling you. Mild symptoms. What is the point in difference is mild symptoms. You can stay at home quarantine. This is what the government is also now advocating over the telephone. They are telling that no need of coming to the hospital. You stay at home quarantine. But while you are in home quarantine, please do stick to the complete set of guidelines for home quarantine, where you are going to have a complete separate room. You do not come in contact with any of your home people. You try to avoid sharing the common bathrooms. If at all there is no possibility, you have only one bathroom, the time when you use it, please clean the bathroom just like common places like the doorknobs, the toilet seat, the flush handles, the basin. Everything has to be cleaned with Lysol or some surface disinfectant after your use, because this is the time when your infectivity is the highest and you are likely to transmit it to other people. This is a very good example of this. You can see it that even in a family, when you have all COVID people, uh, some people might remain uninfected because of their contact. Moderate and severe and very severe, they need a medical care in a medical facility. And the thumb rule is the quicker we initiate therapy, the better chances of recovery. Next slide, please. This is something which people are doing every day. I just wanted to reinforce. So this I wanted to. So this particular red area that you find, this is something which we all do. Even sometimes we unconsciously also do. But I just want to reinforce that this is not a particularly a good habit. The neck, the lower part of your neck, which is red colored, it is an exposed area. And here you can have droplet infections going and sitting there. Supposing you have been talking to a COVID infected person, his droplets are going to definitely settle over the nape of your neck. So once you have downed the mask and then again pulled it back, the red mark shows how you are able to, you are pulling the infections from the neck to the up. Next slide, please. So these are called mask etiquettes. So I think everybody should be following it. Please, yeah. So another very, very important thing is I see a lot of people wearing masks with valves. So see, these kind of valves in most of the places are totally not allowed. I know it is very difficult to breathe with a mask, but with a valve, you are putting others at risk. Once a valve is a one-way flow. It allows the air to come in, but it does not allow it allows the air to come, does not allow the air to come in, but it allows it to go out. So what happens is the infections from the person, they all go out to the everybody. So that person, a valve mask, is just like any open person without a mask talking to everybody and transmitting his infections. So we, as is very strictly in public places and in our hospital environment and other places, we do not allow people with valve masks to commonly roam. Also their patients, attendants, everywhere. Next slide, please. So this was something like you should know how you should not for the lighter moment. I had just put it so that we are not putting it beneath our nose or beneath our mouth, and when we are using. Next slide, please. So now once we are coming to the contact to the transmission of the disease and how what are the infectivity period of the disease. So I would like to clarify a few things about the investigations. There is a lot of confusion. Government is giving a lot of, from time to time it is releasing this investigation versus that investigation. We got some year to from what you say from the China. We got a huge number of investigation kits. They were returned. Somebody said antibody test should not be done. IgM. So there are, I wanted to clear a few things. See, the gold standard for detecting COVID in any person is the RT-PCR, which is the molecular swab. You find it now, you see it in the television that somebody is putting a small like swab kind of a thing, something like the earbuds that you have. It is a longer kind of a thing. Then they are putting into the nose, they are going to the posterior part of your nose, which is called the nasopharynx. And from there, they are taking swabs. It's a painful thing. And believe me, we are trained that the person should have a trickle of teardrop from his eye. The reason being, there are some glands, there are certain nerves which are at the posterior pharynx, which get stimulated, and your teardrops, they do fall down. So don't take it in another way that we are trying to, the doctors or the medical fraternity are trying to give you too much of pain. But that is the place. If we do it superficially from the lower part, from the outer part of the nose, you will get a false negative result, which means that you will be having the virus, but the result will be negative. So that is why we are getting a huge number of false negative results, which are not correctly because of the swab not being taken properly. So this particular, what does this test do? It tests in the swab, they try to grow that culture, that thing, and they try to detect the RNA of the virus. So there are two parts of it. So one thing is, once the RNA of the virus is found in your swabs, that means the RNA is there in you. That means the virus has been there in your body or in the posterior naropharynx. So you are definitely a COVID positive patient. But once you have a COVID, so we were initially, when the initial days, government was insisting on a COVID negative to discharge the patient. That was a great myth. That is why the government has given it up now. So what is the cause is this viral RNA, even when the virus is dead, the RNA will be there and your body will be shedding the viral RNA because they are the dead virus RNA. This test does not detect between a live and a dead virus RNA. It cannot say from the RNA that whether it was from a live virus or from a dead virus. So if it is from the initial part of the disease when you are having symptoms, that means that it is from that you are COVID positive. But if after 14 days or 17 days, even if you are testing positive for COVID, that does not mean that you are having COVID, because you will go on shedding the dead virus for quite some time and your COVID test, this RT-PCR test, will be positive. Now let us come to the antibody test. Now there are two types of antibodies, IgG and IgM. So IgM is a test which we try to do for detecting the early antibodies. When you get an infection instantly, your immunoglobulin M rises, and we can say that you are definitely, you are most likely harboring a immediate infection within the last few days. And once you have the IgG, it will say that yes, you had an infection, but you have also developed some immunity towards it. So this tests, the IgG tests the immunity for the coronavirus. Now the government is doing it as serosurveillance for all the medical staff and for all the other people. Like we have given our blood recently, so it tries to detect that what is the level of IgG in all the medical staff. That means how much amount of immunity we have built for COVID, because we have been working in COVID for the last 4 months, 5 months. So definitely, unknowingly, we might not have been symptomatic or having a very, very fatal disease, but we don't know. We might have been taking small, small loads of virus and we have been developing immunity as such. So we might have been asymptomatic, but all the time we might have got a disease and by which we have developed an immunity. But how to know that whether I am immunity or I have never contracted the virus? It will be known by the immunoglobulin G. If my IgG levels are high, it will say that I had an infection sometime during the course of this time, but my body never expressed the symptoms and I also developed antibodies to it. So I am safe to work. So this is how these two tests are commonly, which are there, and the confusion which is persisting. Next slide, please. So now we come to the common therapies which we are current therapies. So let me be first very, very clear. Please, I am not going to delve into the other non-controversial to the other therapies of which are non-paramedical or non-allopathic, like whether Amla is helpful or whether Giloy is helpful. Yes, they are definitely, they are showing some promising reports, but I am not a correct person to comment on them, neither say anything against them, because they are in their own field. So I would handle definitely with we are doing with these whatever therapies that we are currently giving. So first is what antivirals. There are three kinds of therapies which we are normally giving. There are other things also. First is the antivirals. So ritonavir and fluvipiravir are the common antibiotics, antivirals which are being used. There are so many other antivirals, but these are the two antivirals which are somewhat effective. Now let me tell it to you that fluvipiravir is a very cheap version of the Indian version. We have got it, but effects are not very great. What we have been seeing over the last 1 month since its launch. Ritonavir, yes, there is definitely some effect, but it is not so effective, and no large control trials have successfully shown that yes, it is the antiviral which kills the coronavirus. It has not shown still now, but definitely it does have some role in decreasing the time span of the disease, or maybe the virulence of the disease, or the huge amount of what do you say, the infectivity of the disease. Second most important, what we find is the anticoagulation. Now we give a lot of heparins. You means for layman terms, it is the it is commonly told, and we use usually we are using only what I would say Solumedrol. We are using. There was a question from a doctor whether we are using dexamethasone versus Solumedrol. In the Indian scenario, what context, what we had seen most of us, we had seen, especially in South, in Chennai, Apollo, especially all in Kerala and Bangalore also, what our colleagues, we all found that those who started with Dexona and then some of them started with Solumedrol, the results what we found, that the results with Solumedrol were definitely much, much better as compared to Dexona. So now almost pan-India, people are using Solumedrol 40 milligram BD. That is the standard dose that we are using for this thing. Only once the antiviral therapy is completed, once the this is for my doctor colleagues, not for the other common public, and once the disease process has decreased, once the virulence has decreased, once the patient is clinically, we are shifting either to Omnacotil, mostly oral Omnacotil, to these patients. Regarding the low molecular weight heparins, we are using Clexane or Fragmin in these cases. So you know that in many of these patients, we are getting a lot of coagulation disorders. Many of these patients are having very high D dimers, which for the doctors they would be able to understand, and for others it is basically it's a product of the breakdown of the clots. So which means that there is an extensive clotting everywhere in the body. So to avoid that, we are using low molecular weight heparins, which are the blood thinning agents. We commonly use either Clexane or we use Fragmin. Next slide, please. So today I would like to discuss a little about the plasma therapy. Plasma therapy has found a lot of enthusiasm in India, although all over the world it did not receive much of enthusiasm. But in India, we found that especially in Delhi, you remember that yesterday, Arvind Kejriwal has opened the plasma bank in one particular hospital. And here also the state government and the ICMR, they both have a program, and we are enrolling plasma therapy for many of our patients. Now, you must understand that what is a convalescent plasma. It is definitely an experimental therapy, and here what we do from patients who have recovered their from COVID in the last 30 to 40 days. So we are taking their plasma, taking their, I would say, the blood. From the blood, when we separate the blood, RBCs and other things, the red part of it, we get a liquid part which is yellowish or straw in color, and that is called the plasma. So this, when given to a person who is fighting COVID or is very badly hurt with COVID, it is anticipated or it is expected that it does help him. Now, let me tell you that why I wanted to tell it at this thing in the COVID. Why I would like to put it before the Satyasai and the other youth organization who are working. There is a huge shortage of plasma, because when we are also trying to use the plasma, so we are not getting usually plasma therapy. So many of our staff and other people. So what I believe that we should spread the message to the society that the plasma therapy is quite a definitely a promising therapy. Now, when do we use plasma therapy? When the patient who has come in the, let us say, moderate disease, and he has already been started on all the antivirals and everything, but his inflammatory markers are very high, or that he is progressing to severe form of the disease. It is at that time that we try to initiate him with plasma. So normally we give them 1 unit of plasma normally, but if the, in certain cases, normally our trial does not allow second, but if the patient is definitely having a very severe form of disease, and they do arrange, the patients attendant themselves arrange through some good Samaritans. So we try to give them a second dose of that also. So this is about a plasma therapy. Next. So here I would like to tell something about the cytokine storm. See, for the layman, for the lay public, so what is happening is the cytokine storm is something like when COVID happens. It is something like it increases the inflammation within you. It is something, inflammation means something like when you have a fever, there is a lot of sweating is happening, your blood pressure increases. It is like a storm which happens within your body. So same thing, the COVID itself does not kill by choking your respiratory tracts or anything. It is the cytokine storm. It is like the immunity of your own immunity is trying to kill you. So these immunity producing substance like the interleukins, what we call them, interleukin 1, 6 especially, and TNF alpha, tumor necrosis factor, these are inside our own body. They are produced when there is any massive injury, or when there is a massive threat to the population or to the human body itself. It happens usually after a huge trauma. When you have a massive trauma, we see it usually, let us say you are having a huge, massive accident you have. So we find that in such kind of a thing that you have a cytokine storm. Then some cases of sepsis, when you have a very severe infection, when your whole body is infected with a very virulent organism, we find a cytokine storm. In dengue also, dengue shock syndrome, we also find a cytokine storm. We are finding that in this COVID, the cytokine storm is a very virulent form. So this is with us, of course, it is only a therapy, it is only a, what you say, experimental therapy. Large scale randomized trials have not yet been done, so we cannot vouch that this is the standard of care. So, but they are definitely experimental therapies. So here we have tocilizumab and itolizumab. Itolizumab is produced in India, and tocilizumab is imported from outside. So these are drugs which we use as a single dose therapy mostly to bring down that storm, to calm the storm to some extent, so that the body doesn't kill itself or destroy its own organs. So this is but the problem with these drugs are they themselves have their own side effects. And another part of it, that now because of this COVID pandemic, there is a lot of hoarding of it, and the cost of it, they have already disappeared from the markets, and they are being sold at as if they are life-saving drugs, something like what Hanumanji brought for Arjun. I mean, for Lakshman. So that's something like Sanjeevani Booty. They are hoarding it like that, and they're selling it at almost 5 times, 6 times the rate. So that is causing a lot of problem for patients who actually requires them. So they are not available in the market mostly. Next slide, please. So now about the vaccine. Everybody is now very anxious about that when we are going to vaccine. See, my friends, let me tell you, I will first tell you what are the types of vaccine. These are all viral vaccines. I'm talking about viral. So there are three types of vaccines that we normally have. One is a live attenuated vaccine. Now, what does it mean? It's like, let us say, I take a virus, let us say now COVID vaccine. I take the COVID, I try to pass it through some genetic changes so that it remains a live vaccine. It goes into my body when it is given, multiplies just like it would have had I had a normal COVID infection. But the problem is somehow by some mechanisms outside, either by changing its DNA structure or something, I have done it in such a way that it does not have its virulence. It is just like a non-virulent kind of a vaccine. So this is the kind of a live attenuated vaccine which is available for a few of the common viral diseases like like MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, these kind of things, which are viral diseases. They are live attenuated. So sometimes what happens when you get a live vaccines, you have seen that in children when they are given the MMR or something, they have a little bit of fever. It is because that is a live vaccine. The viruses are live, so when they get inside, they cause an infection. But they are because they are attenuated. Attenuated means they are you can say that the teeth or their sting has been taken out, so they cannot cause any of the damages that normally happens. The other type of vaccine which we have is the dead vaccine, in which viruses are grown and then they are killed. They are killed either by various processes, either by chemical solvents or they are killed by heat or whatever you can do. So what happens in this kind of a vaccine is they retain only their antigenicity. Antigen means that the virus protein which is there outside, that when it goes into the body, it tries to develop a antigen to that and antibody to this particular to the viral structural proteins that the of the cell wall of the virus. And when the real virus comes, it is assumed that these antibodies will kill that virus. The third is the immunomodulant vaccine. So in this, there are changes. These are the latest forms, and they are not available so much. And their research is still in this, where they change the immunity of the person to such a way that they are likely to uh, mm, thwart any kind of attack. Now, the last line I have written, is it all a myth? See, friends, COVID is a very, what I would say, it is, I think after the Spanish flu, it is the greatest threat to mankind. Since the Spanish flu in 1918 and today, there is a huge change in our economic structure, in the way how we think, how we talk, how we wear, how knowledge has expanded, and we are a well-connected society, and we are a wealthier world. So there is a lot of difference. There is a lot of huge amount of change. Every person, what do you say, is more precious. He considers his life to be much more precious than it was in 1980. So it is this particular feeling that our pharma companies, our governments, and there are many people who are exploiting this particular, and they are trying to spread a rumor that that the vaccine is just beyond the reach, just here, it is just around the corner, within a month, within 2 months. You must have seen that those who invest in the share markets, the companies which announce that we are already in the early stages of our vaccine research, and they suddenly you find that their share prices are rising. So these are some of the marketing gimmicks. I don't want to discuss too much because they are not in my way. But let me be very honest with you all. Getting a live attenuated vaccine is the only vaccine which is likely to actually give us some relief. Getting a live attenuated vaccine for COVID-19 is not at all an easy job, which most of the people, those who work in microbiology for long years, have agreed to it. They may have to speak or take an alternative line because of governmental pressures, because of economic pressures, because of financials, or so as not to cause a kind of a disdain among the humanity. But the fact and reality is it takes a huge time to attenuate a vaccine and get it. Now, the other problem is the viruses are much more intelligent than our microbiologists or the virologists. They do keep on changing their structure every now and then. You see this with influenza vaccine, H1N1 vaccine, which we have currently. So it is today, this year it is H1N3, the next year it is H2N2. So if you have taken for H1N3, you may not be protected against H1N3 or H2N3. So this is the same thing. The vaccine, the RNA viruses, they keep on changing their structure in such a way that it is very difficult to find out a live attenuated vaccine which is going to give us a blanket protection. Only way out of this is the immunomodulant vaccine, which is going to modify our RNA so as to stop the production of the viral RNA within our body. Dead vaccine is the easiest one to form, and I predicted that this is the easiest and the first vaccine, so-called vaccine, which will be there in the market, which people have already booked off the shelf by paying huge amount of money. So they are going to be dead vaccines. So people are some labs are going to culture this coronavirus, then kill them by chemical means or some other means, and then store them as vaccines and sell it to the other people. Yes, you will get some degree of immunity of it, but it is not going to give you the exact immunity what a live attenuated vaccine will be able to give you. So this is all about the vaccine, which I wanted to remove your myth. Next slide. So with this, I try to end because I have been discussing a lot. I have a lot of questions, so I would like to answer most of them. So please keep in touch. This is the kind which we have considered it as a ideal for in our hospital, and so keep in touch with family and friends. Inform others if you have symptoms. Never ignore your health. Why? Because those who are hypertensive, sugar, diabetics, or having other disease, you please keep your things in control, because we find that the prognosis is much better once you come with a controlled sugars or controlled blood pressure. And don't panic. We are in this together. A lot of other people are there to help it.